afternoon, college football enthusiasts. Missed you last week with the e-learning and all that, but we're going to do the Week 9 recap and our Week 10 outlook. For starters, we're going to start with Tennessee absolutely destroying Kentucky. Thoughts on that?
I kind of saw that coming. Kentucky's not the same team they were last year. I think a lot of people were impressed with Kentucky last year. I know I was. They're not the same team, so I think a lot of people have the expectations, hey, maybe Kentucky can compete in the SEC, and I think they kind of got knocked down. I mean, Kentucky's a basketball school, most people would agree,
yeah.
So I think they kind of got knocked down to where they belong. And Tennessee's good, and we'll talk more about Tennessee a little bit later, but I kind of expected that. Were you shocked by that outcome?
I was more shocked with the fact that they held them to only 6 points. I mean, that's a big statement for their defense.
It is. They needed it.
And obviously Kentucky doesn't have the best offense, but really we've seen their defense struggle throughout the year. I mean, normally SEC isn't much of a shootout, but Tennessee and Alabama, I think that was a very high-scoring game. But to see them kind of get a good defensive game might be good for them in the future, especially this next week with Georgia. But that earned them the first ranking in the college football playoff ranking, which we'll talk more about that later. But then Kansas State ends up destroying Oklahoma State, shut them out. I mean,
that was my shocker of all shockers last week. Even on this show, I was saying, Oklahoma State was my pick to win the Big 12. I thought they were just the way they played football. They were well coached. They got veterans on the offense and defense and stuff, and them losing the game is one thing. Them getting obliterated. I think it was 35-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
And they were shut out. They didn't even score. Where's your competitiveness?
Yeah.
How do you? That just blew me away.
I think it was at Oklahoma State too, which is absolutely crazy. And then Wake Forest gets beat by Louisville, which Louisville looked kind of rough there for a while. Somehow pulled that off, but
I think Wake Forest is not a very good team. And we'll talk about this when we get to the rankings. I think the ACC is way overrated. So I was not surprised to see Wake Forest lose that game.
And then Ohio State ends up surviving Happy Valley.
That was one of the more exciting games to watch.
Yeah.
Happy Valley is a crazy place to play, and Ohio State was missing some running backs. They got some serious injury concerns. Ohio State does. Even as an Ohio State fan, the team that took the field last week is not winning the national championship. Their defense looked good at times, but they cannot run the ball right now. They kind of have this two-headed beast at running back, and they're both dealing with injuries. Their alleged best receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba, is still not playing. Marvin Harrison looks like he might be the best receiver in the country, Marvin Harrison Jr., but too many injuries on Ohio State, which is probably why that game was a little bit closer. Give Penn State credit. That was kind of their season. Great environment to play in. The crowd was in it the whole game. Really fun game to watch. But I don't think the score really indicates how close the game was.
Yeah. And then Michigan ends up beating Michigan State, which I didn't think that would be much of a game, but some people thought it might be just because of last year's game.
Rivalry games, usually pretty close.
Closer,
and Michigan State did keep it close.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Michigan pulls away late, and that looks a little more lopsided. But early on, that was a competitive game. And I think Michigan maybe it started to show a little bit of weakness there when they were so close. Michigan State's not a good team this year. And so to keep it close, even in a rivalry game, I think that was Michigan's chance to send a message to the playoff committee. We'll talk about the rankings and where they fell. But if they would have had a stronger statement in that game, maybe their rankings would be a little bit different.
Yeah, moving on with the rankings. So if you want, we can talk about our top 5. My top 3 is the same as how the college football playoff had it. So I'll have Tennessee at 1, Ohio State at 2, and then Georgia at 3. But instead I have Michigan at 4, and then Alabama at 5. I don't think Clemson should be in the top 5, even top 6. I mean, I just don't think. I think if you had to pick a 6, for me it would be TCU, just because the Big 12 seems to be so much stronger than the ACC, just overall top to bottom. But
where would you have Alabama fall in that ranking? They're one of the only teams that we haven't, with a loss that kind of everyone's given a shot.
Probably number 5.
So you think you put Alabama at 5 above TCU, who's undefeated right now?
Probably, just because Tennessee, their offense is very overpowered. If TCU can it's hard for them because they don't have any other powerhouses, which they've had consistent good wins, but there's not a Tennessee or a LSU that can be if Alabama can knock off LSU this week or that'll definitely solidify their number 5 spot. But
the other issue that TCU is going to have is they're going to have to beat someone twice in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult to do for a team. You play them once, now they have film on you, everything you did the first time. With how the Big 12 was ranked, everyone plays everyone. And then the 2 top teams play in the Big 12 championship. So that could be a problem for them. My top 5, I have Georgia at number 1 still. I put Ohio State at 2. The only reason I did not put Ohio State at 1, a couple reasons, injuries right now. And to me, the undefeated champion is still should be number 1 until they show something. And they struggled at times this year, but to me they're still the number 1. I have Tennessee at 3, and then Michigan at 4 is my number 4 team. Then I have at 5. I'll do 5, 6, and 7. TCU, Bama, and Clemson. So I do give TCU more credit for Bama for having for being undefeated at this point. I'm going to give Michigan a lot more credit than I'm giving Clemson. I even give Bama more credit than Clemson. The ACC, to me, is an absolute joke. I don't know how you can give anyone credit. Even the College Playoff Committee, what they're saying about, the Notre Dame. Now they're trying to hype up Notre Dame to give Clemson a quality win this week, and that's a big matchup. But when they're talking about Ohio State, they're saying that's their most impressive win, and it's not very impressive. Well, how can it be not very impressive for Ohio State, but very impressive for Clemson? So there's some double talk there. TCU and Clemson have identical records. TCU's strength of schedule is higher, ranked at 3 as opposed to 4 for Clemson. TCU has more ranked wins than Clemson has. I don't know how you justify Clemson being ahead of TCU.
Yeah.
That is, unless you're just trying to do it to hype up the Notre Dame game this weekend for TV ratings or something. But no on-field product you can look at and say TCU is not a better team than Clemson this year. I was debating between Tennessee and Ohio State there at 2 and 3, and I think those are interchangeable. Tennessee has weaknesses on defense, and 1 week of being successful against a not great Kentucky offense doesn't really reassure me that they fixed it. So if Tennessee comes out and locks down Georgia, they're the clear number 1. No questions asked in my mind. But the defense is a question mark for Tennessee. I think the offense is a question mark for Michigan. So a lot of these teams have questions. Georgia for a number 1, hasn't really come out and shocked the world. Ohio State's looked beatable at times. Tennessee's defense is atrocious. Michigan's offense struggles. So I think the top 4, there's some room to move. But the fact that people that'll have Clemson higher is to me inexcusable.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I think there's kind of riding the past. Some people might make the argument they're not even top 10 team. I think this week's game for them, if moving to week 10, if Notre Dame can knock them off, I will be very excited because I think Clemson has had they've not blown anybody out all year, other than maybe their non-conference games, but kept it close with Syracuse. NC State was kind of close. They haven't really seemed elite like some of these other teams.
Exactly. At least these other teams, Tennessee looks elite on the offensive side of the ball.
They have a part of their game that's elite.
No part of Clemson's football
is elite.
Looks elite right now. Absolutely, I agree with that. This'll shake up, as the season goes on, especially this week as we start looking ahead.
So we have LSU, Alabama. Bama's favored by 13.5. I think that's very favorable to Alabama. I think LSU will at least cover.
Really?
I think with it being in Death Valley, LSU looked kind of bad at the beginning of the season, but I think they're starting to turn around. Kelly's kind of doing some good things for them, but I think that LSU will at least cover. I don't know about pulling all the way off, but that would be a big game for both teams. If LSU can knock off Alabama, that's huge.
I don't think LSU is a good team. I'll take the opposite approach. I think LSU is a bad football team this year. I think Kelly's a good coach, but he needs time to get players and systems in place and get his assistants and everything. I think LSU's over. They're ranked number 10 right now. I think the only reason LSU's ranked number 10 is to give Bama a quality win. I think the playoff committee's made it pretty clear they want at least 2 SEC teams in, if not 3. And getting the only how can you justify LSU at 10 right now, given their record and the quality wins that they have? Their out of conference wins are atrocious, and with the losses they have, I think the only reason you put LSU at 10 is so now you can say Bama knocked off a top 10 team.
Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure, but I think LSU will at least cover, maybe just because of the crowd atmosphere. I mean, it's definitely not an easy place to go in and play. Also, like Alabama's defense doesn't seem too strong. I mean, they gave up 52 to Tennessee, but overall, I think Bama might win, probably will win, but hopefully they at least cover. And then Kansas State shuts out Oklahoma State, but somehow Texas is favored to beat them. I don't understand that at all. So I guess that's one of my upset picks. Really not an upset in my opinion, but
yeah, I would agree with my upset pick for that one. When you look at who's favored in some of these matchups and their records and how the committee justifies rankings, sometimes it feels like they're just like grasping at straws or something.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. And I think if you put them on the spot and had them justify it, they'd probably get a little embarrassed when they realize they can't.
Yeah, I don't understand how people can be so bad at their job and they get paid so much for it. I mean, they're like, if they worked anywhere else, they'd probably get fired.
Yeah,
but,
I agree.
I hope Notre Dame can really knock off Clemson. I've kind of always disliked Clemson, but they're only favored by 3.5, so that is kind of a favorable spread for Clemson, I guess. Like, it definitely, realistically going into the game, they should beat them by more than that, but you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I looked it up on a different betting site, and it was 4, so it's right around that 3 or 4 point margin. That's at Notre Dame. That's a night game. I know Notre Dame's not Penn State, and it's not LSU, and the fan base is probably older. That's going to be a good environment, though. A couple years ago, when Clemson played at Notre Dame, it was a last-second win or something. They have a pretty good rivalry kind of building up. I'm rooting for Clemson to lose. Sorry, I'm rooting for Notre Dame to win here. I want Clemson to lose. I think their ranking is unjustified, and this loss, to me, seals Clemson's fate.
Yeah.
Notre Dame, with their record being what it is, I don't know how you could lose. I don't know how Clemson could lose to that team and then somehow still make the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I would be willing to bet SEC fans are also rooting for Notre Dame here, because if you knock Clemson out of that, then you're also paving the way for 2 or 3 possibly SEC teams.
Yeah.
But I think Clemson, I think they have a legitimate chance to lose this game. Keep an eye on the quarterback situation. I would expect both quarterbacks to play at least a little bit. Notre Dame's defense is good. Clemson's defense is supposed to be good. They were supposed to be elite, and they really haven't shown they're elite yet. With the high rankings of recruits that they got, Clemson's defense should be outstanding, and they haven't really lived up to it. So keep an eye on the quarterback situation for Clemson, though.
Yeah, I honestly feel like their backup is more consistent and better than their starter. I have never really been a big fan on him, but
the backup quarterback's always the most popular guy on the team. It's you're always well, what could we have with this guy? If he gets the start, though, now teams start to get film on him. He's the backup for a reason. There was a competition in camp, and he didn't win. So I think for the longevity of the program, looking ahead beyond this one season, you got to go with the backup.
Yeah.
Because I don't think DJU is your answer long term. So the sooner you rip that Band-Aid off and move on, the better the program will be.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to talk about Tennessee, Georgia. I mean, this might be one of the biggest games of the year. We thought that with Alabama and Tennessee, but with Tennessee winning, it definitely makes it. Also, the divisional implication it has for the SEC East. Whoever wins this game is probably going to face Alabama again for the SEC title game, which also will probably be the biggest game. But these 3 SEC games have been huge. So, you have thoughts on the winner of that?
My initial thoughts when I saw the schedule was I hope this game is as good as Alabama-Tennessee was.
Yeah.
That game was exciting, not just because the high scoring and stuff like that, but it was just back and forth, and Tennessee could have folded when they blew the lead, and they didn't. They fought and they climbed, and the atmosphere was great. I don't think Georgia's atmosphere is super impressive. for as good of a team as Georgia is, I don't think their home field advantage is incredible.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. If they got a good home field advantage, how good could they be? Really important for the rankings. If Georgia loses this, they're the defending national champs. If this is the only loss on their schedule and they don't go to their conference, title game, I think Georgia makes the playoff. I think Georgia loses this game, they still make the playoffs if they run the table from there.
I think either team can lose this game and still make the playoffs, in my opinion. Tennessee or Georgia can. I feel like they can both lose and still win because they don't have to suffer. If they lose this game, there's no potential loss to Ohio State. Probably just that one loss.
So in that scenario, who makes the playoff then? If you have the SEC title game loser, do they miss out over a team that didn't even make the SEC title game?
That's hard because usually there's only one powerhouse in each division. Usually it's Alabama or in Georgia or sometimes Florida, but rarely do we see Tennessee and Georgia both being good and then Alabama kind of being in between. But Alabama is, if they can win out, it's very dangerous for them because they basically control their division, and if they win that title game, I think they're in. It's not even a question.
I think Tennessee's a little bit of fool's gold here. I think they have a good team, but they're not elite yet. They're not Alabama. They're not. I'm saying that they beat Alabama. They're not as good as that. This is one of the worst Alabama teams we've seen in a while too. So you beat a bad Alabama team. You're not as good as Georgia. I don't think you're as good as Ohio State. So and maybe I'll be eating crow at the end of the season, but you don't go from being an average at best football team last year, at which Tennessee was, to being an elite team overnight. Not in college football.
Yeah.
This is not the NFL where there's all this parity. It takes a long time. Clemson was knocking on the door for a long time before they finally knocked off them and won a national championship. Georgia was very competitive for a long time, and then they finally got over that hurdle and won. Tennessee, they haven't gone through that yet. Maybe this is the start of a run for them, but if I pick Georgia comfortably in this game. Georgia's athletes on defense are going to be nothing like Tennessee's ever seen before. And Georgia's offense, it's not like making the highlight reels that Ohio State and Tennessee is. Their tight end room is elite.
Their tight end is.
That guy is a first round pick. And then the first round pick at tight end is kind of crazy. He is a game breaker.
He might be one of the best tight ends we've ever seen.
Absolutely.
People make arguments that he's better than Kyle Pitts. I would argue that as well.
I think he is too.
Yeah.
They can always run the ball. They're going to be able to rush the passer. I see Georgia winning by at least 10 points here. I don't think this is a close game.
Yeah, I think the only way Tennessee wins this game is if their defense steps up for them. The way they don't control the ball, and Georgia will, Georgia is not really in a hurry to get down the field. They take time of possession. So I think if Georgia can just control the clock, control the game, their defense can make plays, I think it'll be Georgia all day. But if Clemson loses this game, I think they're out of playoff contention. Like you were saying earlier, Purdue beat Tennessee last year in a bowl game, and now they're the number one team.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Their win over Alabama, there's no justification for ranking them below top 3, but I think if they lose this game, then it'll be kind of hard for them.
I don't have a problem with Tennessee being number 1 right now. I still have Georgia number 1 in my personal rankings, just out of respect for the undefeated champion.
Yeah.
And but if you wanted to make an argument that Tennessee would win, that's fine with me. I don't have a problem with that. I think Tennessee and Ohio State both look flawed, but when I look at matchups, if I had to bet money on that game today, Ohio State's defense is better than Tennessee's defense, and I think the offenses are comparable. So given all that on a neutral site, I would pick Ohio State. That's why I have them higher. But if Tennessee can figure out that defense, I see a lot of comparisons to Joe Burrow's LSU team with the Tennessee. People are trying to say, yeah, this is just like LSU. I don't think that's the case at all. LSU had studs on defense too. And their defense started to come around later in the season, and I have not seen that. Yeah. I don't attribute their defense coming on last week to them being better. I attribute it to a poor
Kentucky team.
Yeah, a poor Kentucky offense. So I will go on record saying that I think Tennessee is not going to make the college football playoff.
So we have Purdue and Iowa. I get to go to the game, kind of excited. Hopefully Purdue can win out. I mean, if they win out, they win the West. Probably get destroyed by Ohio State, but they win the division. I'm happy. I mean, that's a big step for them, I guess. It's 3.5 is spread. Hopefully, they at least cover. I mean, I really don't want them to lose because that'll be devastating to lose to an Iowa offense that is terrible. But
You said it was 3.5?
yeah,
I would. It's Purdue minus 3.5.
yeah,
I would take that bet. Like, to me, Purdue's going to win by more than that.
yeah. I hope this is a Wisconsin repeat though, where.
Yeah, you never know.
I mean, Purdue did knock them off last year. They usually do play pretty well against Iowa, so I think Purdue's got this game, though. And then Ohio has Northwestern. That's not even going to be a game.
Yeah, Northwestern's a joke. It's a good chance, hopefully, to get some running backs healthy and get, if they're not going to be healthy, then get some backups in the rotation and get them some reps now. I think as far as the Purdue game goes, I think they should win that game. And even if you lose the Big Ten championship game, you're going to go to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
That is nothing to sneeze at. That should be a goal of every Big Ten team, is to make it to the Rose Bowl. And even if they lose to Ohio State or Michigan, whoever makes it out of the East, there's nothing wrong with that as a consolation prize. That's a good season, and they should be proud of that, and it's something they can build on.
Yeah. Anything else you need to add or like to add?
No, I think now that we have the official rankings,
Yeah.
that these games are a little more weighted. They get a little more important. We got Michigan, Ohio State on the radar. A lot of SEC drama is going to figure out this week.
Yeah.
What if there's a doomsday scenario where Tennessee wins and LSU wins? Like, talk about chaos in the college football playoffs at that point. That it would be fun, and sometimes chaos is what happens. So we'll see what we get.
Yeah. And with LSU at 10, like if they do knock off Alabama, like how much more is the college football committee going to elevate them?
Are they a 2-loss team right now? I think LSU's a 2.
Maybe.
Ooh.
Maybe, I don't know. I think maybe just 2. I'm trying to think.
They're at least a 2-loss team right now.
Yeah.
So how high do you put a 2-loss team that
Yeah.
has a quality win over, let's say Clemson wins. So Clemson and Michigan are still up there. How high do you bump LSU up if they have that many losses?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see for sure. But until next week, have a good day.